Okay, there we go. So welcome. My name is Jess Sappington. I'm the Food Systems Program Coordinator for the Regional Small Farms Program housed out of WSU Extension's office in Kitsap County. Tonight's our latest online Dirt Talk event. It's a farmer-to-farmer event where we'll be diving further into the topic of agritourism. We're joined this evening by WSU Agritourism Specialist Trevor Lane, who will be sharing his knowledge and expertise working with farmers looking to implement agritourism as part of their farm business. Specifically, we'll be touching on topics such as economic impacts and common barriers for farmers, as well as risk and liability and biosecurity best practices for having a public on your farm. I also want to mention that we have with us tonight Lisa Vaughn on the call. She works out of our column office and has been specifically working on the Eat Local First campaign, assisting farmers in our region with the new online food and farm finder tool and helping them get listed actually. So she'll be on the call as part of the discussion at the end. She's a great resource for folks. Some of you may already know her, but she'll be able to kind of talk about that and answer questions about that as well. During the talk, please feel free to utilize the chat box. We're going to make sure to stop at points throughout and answer questions as they come up. And we should also have time at the end for even more questions. So I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Trevor Lane now so he can introduce himself and get us started.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Jess. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's so exciting to see so many farmers take time out of this very busy season to come and hear what's going on. And from what I understand, these meetings and these dirt talks are regularly robust. So kudos to you all for all of your work that you're doing on both sides. It's always exciting to see groups like this come together. I've put together a custom presentation based on all of the presentations that I've ever done. And if there's something we don't cover, I'm happy to come back and cover it more in depth, or if there's something that we need to do separately outside of here. I pride myself in being available, so you'll have my cell phone at the end of this presentation. And I think the other thing to say is I normally do pictures and stories, but I took my notes and put them into the slides because I'm thinking people may want some of that that information. Hopefully everything's okay. And on that note, let's just dive on in, if it'll let me. So what are we going to learn tonight? Well, we're going to do a quick introduction about myself, how I got here. We're going to talk about a brief history of agritourism, and then we'll dive into the real thing that brought us here is the risk and liability, biosecurity, and the resources that will help farmers to navigate this landscape. So the 30,000 foot view on me, you can read all of this at a later time. I sold a business to come to WSU and become a subject matter expert. Most people do it the other way around. They get their education, then they go into the world of work. Well, I went into the world of work and got my education every step of the way. I started as a mechanic, grew up on farms my whole childhood, and then somehow made my way to becoming doctor. And before I came into higher education, I was in the entertainment and event space. So I did farm festivals, fairs, concerts, tours, high-end production, things like that. So there's a lot of value that I can add to social media, marketing, advertising. There's so much that goes into getting visitors to your farm. There's a lot more to me than a guy who reads books. So if there's anything we can do outside of this to help you dial in on a niche or a market segment or anything along those lines, I look forward to having those conversations. So the definition of agritourism, it's really undefined. And the leaders in agritourism who mentored me, Dr. Barbieri and Dr. Chase, wrote an article or have written articles about how agritourism is undefined. And there are so many different definitions as to what it is and what it isn't. There's really no general consensus, but the easy way to explain it is it's anything that brings people to a farm or a ranch for entertainment or education. And then from there, you can start getting into the nuances of, well, what defines an event? What defines education? What defines a farm activity? But the bottom line is getting people to your farm to spend money. Where it all started? It started in Italy, known as Agriturismo. They have a robust history of great success in public and private partnerships. I highly encourage anybody who ever gets a chance to stay at a bed and breakfast in Italy to do it, and to get out and go visit a winery, go have some pizzas, and go to Italy and experience this for yourself, because a lot of those concepts and a lot of the things that they do well have made their way over here, from cheeses to goats to corn mazes, hay rides, and everything in between. And currently what we're seeing around the world is a trend to really focus in on the entertainment side of getting people to the farm, because farming's hard work. It's gruesome, it's tough, and anybody who has done any level of farming will agree. And as we look to how do you get people interested in agriculture and working a farm or a ranch, the entertainment side, a friend of mine jokingly says, edutainment is how I get people to my farm. He educates and entertains them to get them there, to teach them that it's not impossible. It actually can be a lot of fun. But there's an evolution happening within agritourism right now and with farms, because we've lost more than 3 million farms since the turn of the century and counting. And they're not being absorbed by bigger corporations. They're being lost altogether. So this evolution that's occurring is having an economic impact on the small farms and small ranches that do exist. And typically in the state of Washington, we see about a $5,000 to $15,000 average window of revenue from agritourism activities, if you can get past all the barriers, the rules, the regulations, and the challenges that are out there. The agritourism is projected to grow depending on the state, depending on the county, depending on where you are. The projections are anywhere from 2 to 20% to the local economy. These are some quick, hard facts about agritourism in the West, our neck of the woods. We rank up there in the top in terms of most popular locations. Word of mouth is definitely the strongest way to advertise and to have a successful agritourism operation. Trying to think what else is important about this slide. The other thing that's important is the National Agricultural Statistics Services. The USDA's website on statistics has some pretty robust information about agritourism activities, what the yields look like, which ones make more money than others, and where the growth is. So what are the barriers? I spent my dissertation working on my doctoral program to understand what are the barriers and challenges to this very promising practice, because it seems to get people excited. They rush right out there thinking that they're going to have all these people come to their farm and they're going to make lots of money. And the first thing they find out is access to capital and startup funding is extremely difficult. And if you're not careful, jumping down to number 3, the costs and the overhead will add up faster than you realize. And the next thing you know, you're upside down, having a difficult time even pulling off the event or the activity. And I've seen people actually get in trouble economically because they didn't have a budget. They didn't really plan or think things through. And so it's important as you start stepping through to make sure you understand what the rules, the regulations, and what the liability can happen. And even though we're going to talk about this here in a little bit, Washington is an indemnification state. That doesn't mean you can't be sued. That doesn't mean you might not have to hire a lawyer. All it means is you probably won't lose the farm. And we'll talk more about that later. But these are the barriers and challenges that keep people away and outside of the agritourism success that's out there. So what are the benefits? The benefits are more and more people are becoming aware. And we're starting to see startup grants through WSDA, USDA. We're starting to see commerce even enter this space with RDBG grants. We're also, like I was saying earlier, an indemnification state where through SB 5808 and RCW 4.24.835, and we'll talk about that in detail towards the end, we now have an affirmative defense. That's what it's called. We have what's known as an affirmative defense towards liability. And as long as you post the sign, and basically what the sign says is, farming is hard, dangerous work, you can die. That's essentially what the sign says. And if you come onto the property, bad things could happen. And once you post that sign, you automatically have that affirmative defense. And we'll get into the weeds on that here in a little bit. The other benefit to the promising practice of agritourism, like I was saying earlier, nationally, the average is about 2,500 to 25,000. The average farm and ranch here in Washington is about 5 to 15,000. And you start seeing significant increases of farms making more than 50,000. I think that was in the, yeah, there it is, the 2012 census. And so it'll be interesting to see what the new census data reveals about growth in this sector. So biosecurity, liability, safety. Hopefully most of you are familiar with GAP, Good Agricultural Practices. This is a surface scan. This is not a very deep dive into all the nuances to biosecurity, liability, and safety. But these are the things that if you will learn them, pursue them, understand them, you'll start to see where they go and the other things that are out there. But this is just a good place to start to have a good idea of what to expect when you enter the space. And FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, if you're going to be doing food, bed and breakfast, this is definitely something you want to know and understand. It's been largely left to the states to decide. So what somebody does in California or Oklahoma or Oregon will not be the same as what we do here in Washington in terms of regulation, rules, and that whole spectrum. It's defined by the states. And then if you have petting zoos, horseback rides, trail rides, anything along those lines, the Animal Welfare Act is something that you definitely want to keep in mind. I've seen some really interesting stories come out of petting zoos and the Animal Welfare Act. So if you do have a petting zoo and you'd love to talk a little bit more about things to keep in mind as you market, advertise, and invite more people onto your farm, feel free to give me a call. And then the other thing that's really helpful is the National Ag Law Center. They've got a website where they amalgamate all of the case law as it comes out, all of the new rules, regulations, like our indemnification laws, you can find there and you can click on, I haven't been to the website in a while, but it used to be where you could click on the state and it would pop up all the links and the laws and everything based on state. So that's another great resource. And I have not been looking at the chat and I don't see any hands raised, but this is probably a good time to kind of pause for a second and see if there's anything there.
We don't have any questions in the chat, but feel free, folks, you can either put your question in the chat or you can raise your hand and we can have you ask it live.
So this slide on biosecurity, liability, and safety is a little bit more dialed in specifically for Washington. The Growth Management Act is something that impacts agritourism sites, especially if you have to plant trees along shores and you do horseback rides there, or you've got a camp there and now you've got to move latrines because of, or outhouses because of, the rules and regulations. And that is also the next lead into the voluntary stewardship program. That is the response and the answer by counties who opted in or out of the growth management thing and how they deal with stuff. So it's always important to check with your planning department, conservation district, and the group, if you do have a voluntary stewardship program, to check with them, work with them, see if there's any rules, regulations that bled over into the planning department that you have to consider. I've seen everything from trail rides to barn weddings impacted by growth management and VSP. And then again, a link directly to the PDF for Washington's laws and rules and regulations.
It looks like the question,
Okay.
find info on the VSP.
Typically that's done either the planning department, conservation, or extension. VSP is done, it's done different in every county. It's administered, the commissioners typically handle that process and the MOA that goes with the funding to do the VSP work. And if you need help figuring that out, just give me a call or email me. And then I see another one here. Where do we go to get the signage to cover our liability? We're going to get into that right now, actually. And I'm going to have to flip screen. So this will be coming down and hopefully I can navigate all this because it's been a while since I've been on Zoom. But SB 5808 led to the RCW 24. I can't remember what subsection. And we're going to actually go through that RCW here in a second. But this is what the sign essentially looks like. The WSDA did a bunch of these. I can't remember the exact dimensions. It's in the law, and we'll talk about that. But it has to be a specific size with specific type of font, specific size of characters and typeset. And then it has to be posted where the reasonable person could see it. Typically, that's your front gate, your driveway, your parking lot, somewhere the minute somebody comes onto the property. If they could have seen it, should have seen it, or did see it, that's all that it takes. And so some people, do different colors. Some people, put it on different materials. It's really the size and the font that matters, not what it's printed on or how it's posted. It's just the visibility of it that matters. All right. All right, I'm going to pause this screen real fast and talk about the RCW. So where did I go? There we go. So RCW 4.24.835. Every agritourism professional must post and maintain signs that contain the warning notice specified in subsection 2 of this section. So the sign that we were looking at has the language that's found in subsection 2. And it very clearly, the RCW lays it out. It has to look exactly like this. It has to be clearly visible location at the entrance or at the site of the agritourism activity. The warning notice must consist of a sign in black letters with each letter to be a minimum of 1 inch in height. Every written contract entered into by an agritourism professional for the providing of professional services, instruction, or the rental of equipment to a participant, whether or not the contract involves agritourism activities on or off the location, must contain in clearly readable print the warning notice specified in this subsection. So if you're doing business as an agritourism operation, you'll want to include this language in your agreements as well. And to go through that language, it says, warning in all bold across the top, under Washington state law, there is limited liability for an injury to or death of a participant in an agritourism activity conducted at this agritourism location. If such an injury or death results exclusively from the inherent risk of the agritourism activity. Inherent risks of agritourism include, among others, risk of injury inherent to land, equipment, and animals, as well as the potential for you to act in a negligent manner that may contribute to your injury or death. We are required to ensure that in any activity involving minor children, only age-appropriate access to activities, equipment, and animals is permitted. You are assuming the risk of participating in this agritourism activity. And I had somebody corner me one time, and because I was involved in the wording of this legislation and helping the Washington Festivals and Events Association navigate the development of this policy. And I got asked, why do we have to paint such a grim picture? Well, if you've ever been on a farm, we all know how grim things can be. And so we changed some language to make it a little more user-friendly and palatable. But it was important at the end of the day that people understand you're coming onto a farm and it's hard work. That was critical. Because from there, you can begin to have critical conversations about what's happening in agriculture as we look to grow more ag professionals, as we look to improve our food systems and local foods. I thought this was an important policy to really develop for a lot of reasons. People need to know what they're getting into. And so the last thing in here in subsection 3 is failure to comply with these requirements concerning the signs and notices. It prohibits an agritourism professional from invoking the privilege of immunity provided by this section. So the indemnification does not stop you from getting sued. It does not stop somebody from moving forward. What it does is it provides you that affirmative defense and a ground to stand on so that you don't lose everything. And one of the other things that I do is I help farmers with succession planning so that they can look to the future, think about the current state of their farm, because you don't want to hand things to the kids or to the next generation or to a new buyer if they don't understand the landscape in front of them. And a good business plan and indemnification plan is part of that succession plan as well. All right, this is probably a good place to say questions, because I know that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. So I linked to the sample sign that's on our website, as well as to the page if they wanted to actually go to the RCW. But there is questions, should this info be included on our participation waiver? So that's a
I
great.
would. I absolutely would. If it's a written agreement, if it's a notice going home to students, or a mailer to people who are going to be visiting, I would include this language every chance you get. Because the more that you can let people know, you can demonstrate that you've let people know this is dangerous and this is hard work, it makes your defense even stronger.
Yeah. Would you suggest, I mean, I don't know how it, if or whether it would even hold up in a court of law if something did happen, but if they were to add it to their participant waiver, let's say for someone registering for a class on farm and they're seeing it ahead of time, is it something that you would suggest they even sign stating they saw that?
I'm not a lawyer. I want to make sure everybody knows that, but that's just good business. The more that you can do to document and demonstrate that somebody knew, should have known, or did know, and a signature kind of helps you achieve that.
Yeah. Similarly, there's another question just asking, can we post for anyone that comes on the farm for agritourism or not? Sounds like yes.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you should see some of the signs people post in Ferry County.
Yeah. Yeah, so guys, I don't know if you see the link there. I also, like I said, posted, we put up recently, fairly recently, actually, after working with Trevor to get this talk going, a page that's specific for agritourism on our Regional Farms website, and it has the RCW link, it has the link to the sample sign, it has some other really great links that if you're delving into agritourism for the first time, please check that out as well. So yeah, I don't see any other questions if you want to move forward.
All right, let me see if I can reshare. Hopefully you can see my PowerPoint.
We're seeing the
RCW.
yeah, well, now we're seeing the resources for agritourism operators, the handbook for small farms.
Okay. All right. So the Green Book, as it's known by the WSDA, is a great place for agritourism operators. It helps you manage and maintain your smaller operations to avoid those commercial and industrial rules, regulations, and oversight that can frustrate an operation. So if you're doing small scale agritourism stuff, I highly encourage everybody to look to the Green Book, and they typically give them a certain amount of them away for free every year. Every other year, I get a box of them, and they go really fast, but it's also online. You can search it. It's in PDF form. And I tell everybody in all of my agritourism workshops, get the Green Book. I can't say it enough. Get the Green Book. All the answers. It's like the Bible for agritourism in Washington. It's great. It's great. Any questions or comments about the Green Book? Because I know sometimes farmers like to chime in and share a quick story or ask a quick question about the book itself. Well, the reason that's important is this Green Book covers things like hand washing stations, toilets, all the way down to you can only sell so many eggs to be classified as a small farm, and you have to process your meat and poultry, this way and this way in order to not have to worry about all the rules and regulations around processing. And it's a really good tool for biosecurity as well. There's a lot that book is packed with really good information.
Yeah, there is oh, thank you, Lisa. She posted the Green Book link, which I was about to do. I also want to let you know that all three of our regional small farms county extension offices, so Colum, Jefferson, and Kitsap, we all have physical copies. If you are a farmer that enjoys having a physical copy, which I know a lot of people do, to be able to mark up, please reach out to your local extension office and we can get you one.
So this isn't necessarily a formal slide. This is more an informal observation, scientific. As a social scientist, watching communities really thrive, really get into the weeds and deal with their liability and biosecurity and other barriers to agritourism. Collaboration, communication, and cooperation is where the win is. And I have farmers who don't like each other, but promote each other. It's really, truly an amazing space when you can find that way to collaborate, even if you don't like each other, because you can learn through that space. You can find out things about biosecurity and, oh my God, who knew that, I have to change my boots every time I go to a new farm if I step in a pen. That's just something that I've learned over the years. But, how did I learn that? Well, talking to farmers. And I have found that when farmers talk to each other and they collaborate and they meet, and that's where the Granges were so great back in the day, there was this diffusion of knowledge and information. And the communities that do really well and have robust agritourism places, they collaborate, communicate, and they cooperate. And what's interesting, just as the not so new guy to the state, Green Bluff was kind of the pinnacle of agritourism success when I got here. It's all I ever heard about. Didn't matter where I went in the state. I heard two things. Oh, you're from Ferry County, and oh yeah, agritourism, that's the Green Bluff thing. How are you going to do that? I thought people in Ferry County don't want people on their farms. And, as I learn how things work, I'm seeing Green Bluff be challenged now. And it's got some real issues in a lot of different ways. And they have, in my opinion, this is totally my personal opinion, I have seen a real shift and change in how they collaborate, communicate, and cooperate. And arguably, because of succession planning or the lack thereof, farms are being sold to people who think they're going to have a moneymaker. They don't know the first thing about orchards. They don't know the first thing about pest management. So now we've got pest management issues. We've got flooding issues. We've got soil erosion issues. And it's all a result of this lack of collaboration, communication, cooperation. But I will say this, because it has been such a robust thing, people are trying to figure it out. And so some of the old timers that are still around, they're working hard to pull the new people together, and conversations are being had. But that high level of collaboration, as the farm started being sold, changed, just naturally kind of changed. And it's been interesting watching everybody kind of work together. I'm also working with another group called the Wild Rose Prairie Association. They're one of the more historic small scale agritourism. You've got Green Bluff on, the commercial industrial end of things, if that's a thing. And then you've got the Wild Rose Prairie Association, which is a group of smaller farms, smaller operations in a smaller vicinity doing very similar things. And the similarities and differences are quite fascinating. We're learning a lot about how to diffuse knowledge across those two agritourism topographies. Those farmers seem to be learning from each other pretty well, and that's been an interesting process as well. But I cannot encourage you all enough to collaborate, communicate, cooperate, because it leads to maps, it leads to menus, it leads to profit sharing. I mean, there's so much good that can come out of trying to really kind of set your differences aside. And I like to use my tribal and rural work as an example of how to collaborate, how to communicate, and how to cooperate. We all know what the problems are. And whenever I work with tribes and rural communities, it's here in Washington, it's different than where I come from in Oklahoma. And I quickly noticed that there's just this tension over failed projects, things that haven't gone well, the overall history of just this nasty, abusive taking that has occurred. But the real win is we all know where the win is, and focus on the wins. Don't focus on the woes. And we know what those wins can be. And when we focus on that win and we set the woes aside, it all kind of seems to heal itself. People begin to come to the table, trust begins to be built, and we're seeing things happen in Eastern Washington that I'm told historically haven't happened for generations, if not decades. And so I really wanted to spend some time on this slide, because this is how you all keep yourselves out of trouble. You talk to each other, you support each other, you work together, you find a path, and there's strength in numbers. And when the planning department doesn't want to give you that land use permit, or the commissioners don't want to change that rule or regulation, when they've got the public in front of them, they usually march to a different tune. And I'm here to help with some of that stuff too. I'm really good at getting people to focus on the win, and I'm really good at helping mitigate the woes and working outside of the group to try and understand that problem, fix that problem, and find another pathway with those situations. So as you get into your land use and liability and biosecurity stuff, if collaboration, communication, cooperation is a challenge for your group, I definitely want to be there. I will find a way to help you. Any questions about that one? Because that's a pretty robust and intense slide too that I like to spend a lot of time on.
I'm not sure if you're going to dive deeper into some of the biosecurity best practices, but I know that that's been a huge thing lately, obviously with the avian flu happening. And I mean, I think a lot of the farms that I've worked with that are just starting out with agritourism, you know, it's kind of an aha light bulb moment sometimes when you're talking to them about some of this, about, you know, especially if there's some type of like alternating farm tours. Lisa could probably talk about this a little bit more with some of the work she's been doing in Column as well.
The biosecurity stuff, the real win is in clothing. And when you're going from farm to farm, being cognizant of that. I've always kind of known that just because I was raised on farms, you know, and we always kept extra boots in the van, kept our pull-ups with us too. Shy of a hazmat situation, just being cognizant about your design day to day, especially when you're stepping in pens, you're touching animals, or you're within less than 6 feet of animals, and then you're going to another farm or another environment. Hand washing and clothing, those are the two big ones. I can't stress that enough, especially with your shoes and your boots, really big. And there's a lot to get into with biosecurity, and I'm not that expert. So I come in and I do just the surface level discussion, help get that dialogue going, and then we bring in others to help do that, because that could be a really robust, especially in the day and age of COVID. Linda Nunzig in Snohomish has been extremely instrumental in working in this space. And I usually defer to her, work with her to do a really deep dive around biosecurity. She literally helped write the book on COVID reopening and biosecurity. And I watched her do it in about a week and give it to the governor. So if we want to do more, we can, but that's about the extent of where I go with biosecurity.
Would you suggest, I mean, is there any written verbiage that you would suggest farmers adopt, especially if they're going to be having the public regularly come on farm?
You know, that indemnification sign is the first one. And then hand washing stations, signage for hand washing stations, hand sanitizer. You definitely want to think about that. Signage is always a good thing, but it can get expensive fast as well. You know, so protocol, you know, when people come onto the farm, hey, make sure you wash your hands before you leave. Make sure you wash your hands before and after you touch animals, those kind of things. And then if you do have the ability to do signage, that never hurts.
What about the requirements for public restroom? You mentioned hand wash station, but is there specific requirements or scenarios that you could discuss? Because I know, like I said, a lot of farms that are just starting out don't know what they don't know, right? Until they don't know it.
One of the trickiest things in this line of work is land use, and it's different in every county. Every director has a different way of how they interpret things. You know, so I'd have to know a little bit more about a specific use case scenario or a situation or a problem of practice. And then I'd have to go to work and figuring out what are the local rules and regulations, because that's a space that is different everywhere. And it's tough to speak to because sometimes the nuances are drastically and starkly different. And I don't know enough about your counties to know, where to point people, or I know what I would say in Ferry County. I know exactly what I'd say, but I don't know enough about Kitsap and Clallam and that area to really know. Food made on site, very simple foods like cookies and tea. Green Book and Health Department. That's the easy answer to that question in the chat. And our health department out here is, let's just say I've had several spirited debates and had to remind people that we all work for a boss to help my farmers get some things done that were being, I think, overly regulated, strictly interpreted when there was room for some discrepancy in there, so it just depends. But the health department and the Green Book are where those answers will be found.
So looks like there's another question about platforms. Do you have any online platforms that you would recommend connecting with tourists?
We're actually going to talk about that. I'm speaking next week in Vermont at the International Agritourism Conference. And that's one of the topics that I'm actually going to go sit in and listen on, because that is something that is near and dear to my heart, is using technology to create efficiencies. And we built Ferry County Sunrise, which is where I do a lot of my agritourism stuff and food systems work through at a local level. And CRM is where our win is. It's how we report. It's how we know who we've talked to. It's how we measure impact. I can't say enough about using CRMs, but I don't know nationally, like, what is the best CRM? What do most people use? Farmers and technology don't always go hand in hand. So this is kind of a new and emerging thing, and tech transfer is something that I'm working on. So hopefully I'll have, I see you, Jay, and hopefully I'll have a better answer and I can come back this fall or winter and we can talk about that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think that a lot of the questions that at least our county office gets is around marketing, right? And so, like you said, sometimes technology does not go hand in hand. I don't think for not just farmers, for a large audience of folks, but I think the training around that and resources and the ability to be able to navigate some of that is huge.
Well, it's even especially harder for farmers, and that's kind of why I single them out, because they're already overworked, overregulated. I mean, and now you want me to learn what? I mean, I get it. I totally get it, so this is also why we have the 4-H Tech Changemakers, and working with Microsoft and Verizon, John Deere, and some of the other corporate partners out there. We've been able to help the national office shore up enough money to make this a national program now. It started here in Washington, and the kids go out and they teach adults how to use technology and adopt new ways of thinking, digital literacy, tech transfer, that whole spectrum of kids working with adults. There's a win in there. And I've seen them come out and bring drones and throw those up in the air and bring a group of people together to see what that looks like. And oh my gosh, it looks like there was a well over here. I didn't even know that, and they're finding things about their rivers and their trails that they didn't know before. So agritourism operators can benefit from our 4-Hers now. And as we roll out all this broadband funding, we're going to see a lot in terms of tech adoption, tech transfer, and funding to subsidize some of these things as well. Yeah, this is, I can see I'm going to be coming back.
It looks like Jay has it's Let's Talk. He created something, so you guys should talk.
Oh, yes, we should. Now I know who you are. I've heard all about this. I was working in the TV white space with their president on a nomadic broadband unit, and Farm Beats entered the conversation when we were doing that, because we were able to drag this thing out in the middle of nowhere and make hotspots without power, without water, with no infrastructure in the middle of the woods. And so, yes, Jay, we do. Yep. Airband. We need to get together.
Was there?
That's awesome.
Help us tech dinosaurs.
Tammy, that's the 4-H Tech Changemakers. I don't know if your county has them or not. I know that the program is about to expand and grow again and some more. But my kids travel, my kids do virtual stuff. They love what they do. They're going to be doing county fairs here in the next week or two. So if we can help out, it's part of putting Ferry County on the map.
I was gonna ask, so I personally had heard about that program. We don't have a Kids app, and I'm not aware that it's in Cullum or Jefferson or any of our neighboring counties. So is that something that you see expanding?
We're hoping so. National just got $130 million, I think, to grow the program. And they just got that money last year. And we added 2 new counties. And it's my understanding, if we continue the program, we're going to be looking to add more counties as well.
That's great. Yeah, that's a huge thing.
Well, and with all this broadband funding out there through the broadband action teams, there may be money for extension to start a tech change makers program using some of this broadband funding for digital equity. Each extension office is going to be getting like $20,000 to $50,000. So that could be enough to hire a coordinator or buy some equipment and do some stuff. So let's talk offline about what that could look like.
Yeah. So is there any questions from, I mean, I know Trevor, you gave kind of a large overview, 50,000 foot view of the topics here. And I know everybody has specific things that are happening, barriers that they themselves may have come up against. But if there's any questions right now for Trevor, I think this would be a great time to kind of open that up to the group.
If it helps too, I've got 16 hours worth of instruction that I have amassed. And I can do this in as fast as 30 minutes as you've seen, or I can take 2 days and we can really dive into, I break down the history, I break down marketing and advertising. We get into the weeds on different programs, events, and activities. I mean, we really get into the stuff. So if we need to break something out and do it a little better, we can.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question for this group. We can even put it in a follow-up if people want. I see Jay also put in that, is there agritourism numbers by region? How do we know if we should even bother? That's a great question.
Well, I'm not in ag and I'm not in youth and family. I'm in community and economic development. I have access to a lot of that data, stuff that people can't get their hands on. And it sounds like we need to talk, Jay.
Yeah, is there anywhere posted though? I'm curious because like the state of Washington tourism, like is that where folks would go?
USDA, the USDA NAS statistics are the best. Those are vetted. Their methodology is sound. You can count on their findings. WSDA has a little bit. The MSRC has some level of economic impact data that shows you where hotspots are. But you've really got to do a local deep dive, and that communication, collaboration, cooperation piece is how you figure out where the win is. Because when farms start mapping and supporting each other, and a family knows that they can take an entire afternoon, go get their eggs, go to the petting zoo, go get their honey, go sit and have cold tea under a shade tree. It starts to change the demand landscape quite a bit. And there's things that farmers can start doing to prepare for that sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And it looks like we have a couple more. How do we safely allow someone access to animals when they're doing a tour?
So Linda Nunzig and the Governor's Economic Development Council have a COVID guide. That COVID guide has all the biosecurity stuff for animals, people interactions. It's all in that guide, and I'll have to see if I can find it. But Linda, like I said, Linda worked with a whole group of farmers, and she said, look, we can get mad. We can spend our time throwing stones at the governor, but we can roll our sleeves up. You do this section, I'll do this section. You do that one. We'll have Trevor look it over to make sure that our grammar is tight. And then they submitted it. And I'd have to try and find that, but that's everything you need is going to be in there.
Yeah, that'd be great. We could include that in the follow-up for a resource sheet as well. I think that would be a really great one to include.
Amy, do you have some top tips for marketing or helpful considerations to share? MSRC, great resource. Can't say enough about it. Outside of this, I've taught classes on, there's an app for that. I love apps. I love technology. I like to integrate different technologies and different apps to make them talk to each other and share information. And there's ways to automate your social media, use artificial intelligence to create videos. Like and it's simple stuff that you can do in minutes. So there's a lot. Maybe that could be something I come back, because I do a good one on marketing and advertising.
What was the acronym? Can you, in case?
MSRC. I can't remember what it stands for. Let me see if I can look it up.
Also, Amy, just FYI, on the page that I linked earlier, and I can relink it to our regional small farms agritourism one, there's a couple helpful guides in there that I believe we linked that I think would probably be really great for you to check out. There's also the University of Vermont has a really great agritourism hub that's also linked there. It includes a lot of resources on getting started with agritourism ventures. It has things for financial planning, liability, marketing specifically. And I also believe they have a really great selection of webinars that you can view on your own time, which might be beneficial for farmers. You know, as you're in the field weeding, just pop in, you know, one of those links to the webinars, and might be pretty informative for you.
I'll have to find that link. I can't remember what MSRC it's pulling up a bunch of stuff that I've never seen before. It's basically a marketing, it's a subset of the USDA and a marketing portal with templates and forms and all that.
Okay. Yeah, we can include that in the resource follow-up as well.
All right, trying to catch up on all the questions.
I think the next one is, what's an average startup range or cost for a small operation?
It depends. It's like research, and I hate that answer more than anything, but it goes back to the local thing. It depends on the rules, regulations, the permitting processes. In Ferry County, it's $100 and a shovel. In Skagit County, it could be $50,000 and a backhoe and a whole bunch of permits. So it just depends. I would first start with, where are you? What are your land use policies? What is the planning department like? I would start there, and then I would say, what do you want to do? What event, what activity? What do you want your operations to achieve? And then we would kind of have to go from there. And it's really hard to put a dollar figure to that, because I'm not joking when I tell you $100 and a shovel, you too can have an agritourism operation in Ferry County. And that is not true in most places.
Yeah, there's a lot of costs to think about.
And they add up fast too, if you're not careful.
Yeah, and I think some of those financial planning, which I think, Rose, you pinpointed this, I think a breakout of topics in different sessions would be helpful, because yeah, it would be easier to digest and be able to hone in on specifics. So I really love that idea of potentially scheduling those. I think there's also, you know, to your point, Trevor, there's financial tools that folks can use depending on their type of venture that they're looking at.
And I help with that too, like business plans, templates, formulas, algorithms. I'm a nerd at heart. I don't tell too many people that, but I can help with that too.
That's great. So Ronnie has a question. How are benefits of agritourism measured financially? There are so many benefits for our local business, restaurants, gift shops, bars, ice cream and bakeries. We sent people to all of them. I don't see how that part can be measured, but it's so significant.
So there's actually formulas out there to do just that, and people pay big dollars for that information. I get to look at it, but we actually have environments where I'm not allowed to take in anything. Like, I get patted down and no discs, no phones, no cameras, and we get to go in and look at economic impact data, and we have access to stuff that nobody else does. And the reality is, it is measured. It's also highly proprietary in a lot of cases. And that's where people like me thrive. That's why I exist, is I go and I get that information, and then I put impact statements together, and I work with elected officials and industry and educators to try and pull all this together to make people more aware and to help inform people so that they can make better decisions about land use policies, rules and regulations. But that information is known, and that's why agritourism is now known as a promising practice, and it's evolving and growing. And I think in time that data will become more and more public as people ask questions, as people press for information, as liability and lawsuits increase, because that just seems to happen when there's growth in an industry, in a sector. And if we need something specific, it might take some work, might take a little bit of funding, but I can get that information.
So can you speak at all to like a generality of the multiplier effect in Washington State when it comes to agritourism? Is there a number that's like a general number you can say for Washington State, this is like the accepted number when you're looking at
5,000 to 15,000 is the general, that's the window of what you can expect to profit from.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the multiplier effect of like.
How does it scale?
Yeah, like for every dollar that someone, puts towards a small farm through agritourism ventures, let's say, what is the multiplier effect in the community?
Yeah. We do that in extension with for every public dollar invested, extension brings $6 to the table. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I do know that that's out there.
Yeah.
And we've seen the median, 5 to 15,000 grow from 1,500 to 7,500. It was 1,500 to 75. Now it's 5 to 15,000. So there's a multiplier effect right there. I just don't know the exact dollar figure for Washington.
Yeah. Ronnie, is it a follow-up question you've got kind of?
We got to come back to Lisa's too.
Oh, yeah. All right. So thank you for answering that. And I'm super excited to know that it's being noted, because I feel like our tax rate for what we do is super extreme, and we're taxed the same as like bars because it's considered entertainment. So it's 9.6%. But the problem is we don't have 400% markup like bars do. We have a limited number of people that we can service on the farm each month. So there's a lot of things that I think are super not okay with this 9.6%. And I would really like to find a way to get us either our own category or just get that. Something needs to change for that, because that's feed for my animals. We're basically run as a nonprofit, and paying this taxes every quarter is just like, it's choking. So that's it.
Policy development is something I do. Let's get together offline and figure out who your elected officials are. I'll work with your extension directors in the region, in the area. We've been able to get policies developed in as less as 12 to 18 months. So that's something we're really good at. And if nothing else, let me help you start a nonprofit.
That's great. That's a great offer. I think Ronnie will take you up on that. Okay, getting back to Lisa, you had a question about insurance. Can you discuss briefly things like bolt-on policies for events, et cetera, to explore the best protection against liability?
Yes. Insurance is always a fun place, because there's really not a lot of options, and underwriting can be tricky if you don't know how to underwrite. But the best thing to tell people is to ask for a separate policy or a bolt-on policy for your agritourism activities. There's some insurance companies that if you aren't careful, they'll lump it all under one policy, one umbrella, and then your rates shoot through the roof. But if you can get that bolt-on policy or get it underwritten separately on a separate policy, sometimes that's infinitely cheaper than just including it in your umbrella policy.
That's great. Yeah. And I think also what I found is really beneficial is farmers who connect and network with their peers and other farmers who have been there, done that, are great ways to get pointed in the right direction of who they've gone through and who works for them and what's been working for them. That's kind of what I've seen.
And I'm really cautious about recommending insurance companies and so again, I spend a lot of time on that collaboration, communication, and cooperation slide for this very reason. That right there, because farmers do know, and they do trust, and they do know who to trust. And I don't always have that information, and it changes quite frequently. And I'm not in those circles enough to be current. And so, yes, you're absolutely right, Jess. That is something that farmer to farmer, start there and then work your way up to people like us, and we'll run our traps and see what we can come up with. But I'm really hesitant to actually recommend an insurance company. I'll always point you to a farmer and say, hey, ask Fred, or Fred and Jane might know. But bolt-on policies and underwriting can be a huge win in terms of getting your rates down and insurance costs down too.
Yeah. Jody, you have your hand raised. Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, this is Erin, actually, but she's here. One of the, maybe I'll just tell you some of the things I ran into with that and would love your thoughts. But in regards to the bolt-on policy, we reached out to our current homeowners policy, and it seemed like they didn't want to do a bolt-on policy at all. They wanted to completely rewrite our home policy and connect it with a farm policy. And there was not even an option to do some type of bolt-in policy. And then I spoke with a couple other insurance companies, and they didn't want to get it into a conflict fighting over who's going to cover what, who's going to pay what, and then, hopefully not get into some legal battle on, like a pissing match of who's home versus farm and who's responsible. So, man, any thoughts you have on that, I'd love to hear it.
That's where I'd go find an underwriter. They're different than insurance agents. They actually take your situation and they will insure it separately. And underwriters are rare. They're hard to find. But they're a great resource if you have one in or around your county.
Does anybody have any contact info for an underwriter in and around Kitsap County I could have that conversation with?
I think Erin and Jody, that's a great topic for the agritourism group, maybe at our next meeting. Or because I think that's come up with previously, and we can talk more about that.
Cool.
And I'll just bring that up now, since this is a multi-county, Zoom event to open it up. If you're in Kitsap and you are looking to do agritourism, if you are doing agritourism, if you're interested in connecting, we actually started helping bring together a network of farmers just towards the beginning of this year. And we've been meeting monthly in person, and it's been really amazing. So please reach out to me if you are in Kitsap and you are interested in joining in that group, or even if you just want to be put on the list for us to give you the emails about upcoming things and topics. So just going to put that out there real quick. But I do see a couple other questions.
Looks like we answered Ronnie's.
We did answer Ronnie's. There's one back up from Meg at Squimby Farm. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's Meg or Buddy that asked it, but it looks like conditional use permits in Clallam County are $2,500. I'm not sure. Do you guys have a question about that, or are you just pointing that out, how extreme and expensive that is? I think that's probably just pointing that out. But yeah, I guess that's a good thing to point out too, Trevor, is that, every county is different.
Yeah.
Every county has a different code, right? If a farmer is running into roadblock after roadblock, would you suggest that they come to an individual like yourself for assistance in that specific case to kind of get some pointers and tips on how to navigate that? Because I do find that a lot of farmers in our county specifically have come up against that.
The people that run into rules, regulations, land use issues, challenges, and problems, the ones who start with me and then go hire counsel, they typically have a really solid roadmap and a good idea of how to approach the situation. somebody who's developed a lot of policy and testified in a whole variety of different settings and situations. I know how to help people navigate these systems. And I have found the people who struggle have had no contact with their extension folks at all. And so I always encourage people, start with your extension office and get some baseline of understanding. If your local extension director can't get you there, we know people. Like, that's one of the great things about working at WSU. I know a gal, I know a guy, and we've got them all the way from economics, all the way down to goats, and chickens. So whatever we can do to help answer those questions, I highly encourage people to start with us.
So that plays into Jay's question. Do you have to pay you, or is WSU paying the bill for your assistance?
It depends. In community and economic development, I'm paid by the state to do these things, but I remind people I'm not a secretary, I'm not a lawyer. I can help advise and consult and do those things. But then I've also produced music at festivals. That has nothing to do with my extension work. So as long as it's within my wheelhouse of what I do by day, and that's pretty much everything. So yeah, you don't have to pay me. I will say that if it does require a large chunk of my time and I have to spend a lot of time in a county or in a community, I have to work with the local director. I've got to find resources because I don't get a state budget to travel and do all of those things. But typically most directors are like, shoot, give you a hotel room, give you some mileage and feed you, come on down. So whatever I can do to be helpful, and, like it or not, COVID has taught us there's new ways to connect.
Yep, that is true. So
no, you don't typically have to pay me.
unless we want to hire you for an event, it sounds like maybe.
Right.
Okay, so Country Companies is one that works with Washington State Farm Bureau. Are you thinking of Country Insurance? Is that Rose? I think maybe that's what she was stating in there. Yes. Okay. And if anyone has a name of an underwriter in Column County, I think Lisa, we can maybe get Tammy networked into some folks who've been there, done that. It sounds like Lisa's been working a lot with some Column farmers, especially with coming up, trying to promote what's happening up in Column in the month of September. So I think she would be a great resource to kind of connect you with a local farmer that could maybe help get you some of those answers.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you, Tammy, offline.
Did I miss anybody's questions in there? I feel like we want to take advantage of your time, Trevor, but I also don't want to over advantage of it. We have until 7:30 if there is questions.
I'm here, and I can hang out, and people can come and go, and we can stick around and shoot the hoot as we say where I'm from.
Lisa, I don't know if you have anything to add, because like I said, Lisa Vaughn, who is working with Regional Small Farms in all 3 counties, but she works out of Column County. She has been doing a lot recently and diving into farm tours and what it takes in Column, because they are trying to do a promotion for September, getting folks on farms and doing events. So I don't know, Lisa, if there's anything that we missed that's been coming up. I know for some of your farmers that weren't able to come on to the call.
I think we've covered most everything. A lot of issues around parking, bathrooms, lack thereof on both fronts, liability, those types of things are the main
All land use stuff, all rules and regulations,
Yep.
And again, back to that communication, collaboration, cooperation slide. One of the things I didn't really hit on, Lisa, and I'm glad you brought all that stuff up again, is mapping. I cannot stress the importance of mapping your agritourism operations. Geospatial analysis, there's so much to be won just by looking at a map and seeing, oh my gosh, there's 20 miles between these 2 places, and oh, there's a little outpost here. When you start mapping, it changes the conversation. It improves a lot of different opportunities, helps you begin to see parking challenges, restroom challenges, like all kinds of land use things. And so that on that slide, you'll notice there's maps on there for a reason, because when you map, it forces you to communicate. When you map, it forces you to collaborate. When you map, it forces you get it. So I can't say enough about that. Thanks, Lisa, for bringing that back up.
Sure, thank you. And Jess, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to mention the Eat Local First Food, Washington Food and Farm Finder.
For sure.
So any of you that were on the call last time already heard about this, but just in case, the Clallam Extension, but Regional Small Farms in general has joined on as a statewide partner in the Eat Local First collaborative organization, and that's at eatlocalfirst.org, and I'll put that in the comments here shortly. And we've put all of the farm information directories that we've had and been collecting kind of individually statewide and put them into one resource to make it very easy for consumers to find local food, be that farms, farm stands, farmers markets, grocers and restaurants who are actually selling locally grown food. And we also have a CSA finder. So if you're doing CSA, and a wholesale finder to try to create wholesale connections. But as part of that tool, we also have a number of options that you can list. Something as simple as having a place that people can have a picnic on your site. If you have like a pumpkin maze, things like that. So it's a great resource if you are going to set up some sort of activities, if you offer educational programs on site. It's a nice way to help consumers be able to find you. And we have gotten a substantial amount of financial support from both WSDA and USDA to build this tool out. So it's a fairly new tool, and we're still building and still looking for people who want to be stakeholders and have an input on how that tool builds out, especially the wholesale finder tool. So if you have an interest in any of that, if you're not already listed, the listings are free. You can list your farm on there for free. And again, I'll put that here in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me and I'll put my contact information in there as well. But it's a really nice resource for doing a lot of advertising for that tool right now. CTAC, we have a huge lit up sign. So tourism, agritourism, it's a great place to have yourself listed. And we've got videos on the ferry and a lot of rack cards and things like that going out throughout different visitor bureaus. So it's a good tool.
Lisa, can you speak to, I know in the past, because there's been so many iterations of these maps and lists for, finding farms and what farms are doing and who they'll have on. Is this a paid, it's free, it's totally free now, correct? For a farmer to hop on, register and list their farm?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no charge. At some point in the future, depending on, we've been getting funding to get this up and off the ground. There might be a potential that we would charge a small fee to have a more advanced listing, but our hope is that it will always remain free for as long as possible, kind of a basic listing.
Yeah.
And it's been free, since we started, so.
And I know with your role regionally, you've been able to assist farmers that have had issues or questions about this. Are you still able to provide that be a resource for them?
I'm a resource for Clallam, Jefferson, and Kitsap.
Yes.
And then you can, certainly if you're on this call, I'm happy to help you, but helping the entire state is not in my wheelhouse right now. But happy to assist anybody that's listening tonight. And you can actually reach out directly at the eatlocalfirst.org site as well. And then if you are in Kitsap and Jefferson County, we have a smaller subgroup with more regional partners, and that's Eat Local First, olipen.com. And we are the ones who are putting on Eat Local Month every September in those two counties. And so that's where the work you're mentioning, Jess, that I've been doing is just trying to really facilitate getting people on a farm, especially now that we can after COVID.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, if anybody has questions, please put it in the chat for Lisa, or you can reach out to her directly. We'll put her contact information on the resource list as well. And then Tammy has a question. Have you seen very small farms, hers is less than 3 acres, be successful with agritourism?
Oh yeah, I have. It's amazing what a bonfire and a keg can do.
Well, yeah, and Tammy, I'd have to say also, like, we have a lot of farms that are, I mean, as you can imagine, in our area, we are all small farms, right? The majority of the farms that we work with are 5 acres and under, believe it or not. And so there are quite a bit of farms that are doing some really cool things and bringing the public on. And, you know,
Yeah.
events, classes, I mean, just depends.
Classes, petting zoos, I
Yeah.
mean, workshops, making soap. There's all kinds of things that can be done.
Yeah, for sure. I don't see, let's see. I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Could I mention one thing I forgot that didn't come up? I know it's on our resource page, just the Regional Small Farms page, but if you are looking for one of those signs, there's a possibility that we will be able to provide some of those. No promise yet for people in our county. And you can purchase those from the Washington Farm Bureau. And I forget, and Trevor, you might know, I think they're like $50, $60, depending on whether you're a member. And there is a
Yep.
link, and it's a little bit on the page, it'll say something like farm signs or agritourism signs, and you have to click a little plus button to get it to drop down. So just want to point that out because it's not all that clear when you go to the site. But if you're looking to buy one of those, that's exactly the right dimension and just buy one
Yep.
sign, it's an easy way to do that.
Yeah, I just put the link in the chat and it is a little bit confusing, but I think it's because they have so many resources on that page that are
Yep.
different. Yeah, I think, and you can get them, like Trevor mentioned, it's not really about the material it's printed on or, you know, specifics of that, but really the size of the font, the color, the size, all of that information. So you could go to your local printer and get it printed as well, probably for cheaper or online. Tammy is asking, what were those dimensions again, and can they be larger for the sign?
Yes, they can.
Do you remember the dimensions,
1
Trevor?
inch. They have to be 1 inch tall, and I think at least it doesn't say a ½ inch wide, but I'm pretty sure when you get in, it's like at least a ½ inch wide, so that it's legible. But it have to be at least an inch tall.
Yeah.
And then the sign has to be an exact like 36 by 36 or 36 by 48, or it's got dimensions as well.
That's great.
And I was looking, it's not MSRC, it's MRSC, and it stands for, see if I can remember. Here it is. Here's the website. I'll just drop the link
Okay.
in the chat. That way you all have it. But they've got templates, forms, great information on marketing, advertising, how to evaluate, do research, citizen science stuff. Like, it's a great resource.
It's great. Well, does anybody else have follow-up questions or comments? This is kind of your guys' time. Perfect. Thank you, Trevor, for dropping that. I'll include that link also in the follow-up resources. And Amy says, thank you. Thank you, Amy, for attending. It's always lovely to see you, at least see your picture virtually. I don't get to see you in person anymore, so. I
just love it when farmers coalesce around an event. It's always super exciting because I know how busy everybody is.
Yeah. I'm going to send out just so you, and I have the evaluation prepared, but some people have popped off. And I do want to add, now that we're talking with Trevor about potentially doing smaller breakout sessions about specific topics, I think I'm going to add that into the evaluation. So please, I'm going to send a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to this video, the resource sheet, as well as the evaluation. And please take the time if you can. It'll only take a few minutes to do the evaluation, and then it'll also allow you to give that input about potential topics for the classes. I'll includes them in a multiple choice format for you all. Awesome. Well, I think looks like everybody's just saying thank you. And thank you, Trevor, so much for your time. And
Thank you all for your patience, because the last time was a real, I don't think I've panicked that much in quite a while, and to have a cell tower go down and county phones go down and the network went down. I mean, it was just like one thing after another. So thank you all for the grace and patience and kindness that you've shown me in bringing me back.
yeah, no, thank you. It was all a perfect storm last time, but it worked out. I think that we had more attendees that were able to come on this time, which was great, different attendees. So I think this is all going to be good.
Good.
So yeah, thank you so much, Trevor, for your time. Everybody, please be looking for an email tomorrow with all that information that I noted, and reach out if you have questions specifically to Trevor. Trevor's already raised his hand as being a resource for you all. Please reach out to your local extension office if you're not in one of the 3 counties that is putting this on, as they're also great resources. So yay, thank you guys for the time. Have a good night.